We have two amazing guests with us. It's 2 o'clock on Saturday on the East Coast. It is 11 a.m. So good morning for those people on the West Coast. Thank you for joining us. Just going to sit here for a minute or two, let people get in. Please leave a comment. We're going to be jumping to questions pretty quickly here. So get your questions ready. You can put them in the live comments either on Facebook or YouTube, and we will get to your questions as soon as possible. But just going to sit just a minute longer, maybe another 30, 45 seconds to let people get situated. But definitely say hi. Let us know you're here. Tell us where you're from so we can give a shout out. And we will be with you momentarily. Oh, hi, Michelle. How are you? Good to see you're here. Michelle's on the West Coast. Maya from Long Island. Hi, Maya. Jeff Shemansky. I'm not familiar with that guy. Long Island, New York. How are things in New York? Paul Johnson from Minnesota. Cordell. Oh, Houston. I was born in Houston. What's up, Cordell? Hi, Sean. Good to see you, buddy. Ashley in Louisiana. We're starting to populate a little bit. Melissa in Virginia Beach. Great, great. I'll make the announcement one more time, and then we'll get started. People are starting to join us. So, first of all, good afternoon for those of you on the East Coast, and for everyone on the West Coast in the morning. Good morning. This is the OCD COVID-19 Town Hall. It's a special edition of Just Ethan, sponsored by the IOCDF, the International OCD Foundation. We have two amazing guests with us today, Shala Nicely and Kimberley Quinlan. I will talk more about them in a minute. I'm usually used to being the best looking one on this stream, so I'm kind of, I have to just sit with the discomfort of not being that today. So for those of you new to the stream, my name is Ethan. I'm the National Ambassador for the International OCD Foundation. I sincerely appreciate you joining us for this special edition of Just Ethan. We know that these are really unusual times, and we know how important it is to come together as a community to support one another. Actually, Shala and Kim are not only here as clinicians and experts, but also as friends, experiencing this right along with you. We're definitely not immune to the uncertainty that life is currently throwing at us. In fact, you definitely don't need to struggle with mental illness to have anxiety sort of knocking on your door and asking you to come out and play. But if you do have OCD or anxiety or whatever it may be, we know the struggle can be twice as hard. So we've come together to answer your questions and shed some light on tools and strategies, and above all, let you know that you're definitely not alone in this. So the topic is serious, as they all are, but if you know me, I'll try to inject a little humor when it's appropriate, or if you know me, it probably won't be appropriate. Either way, there'll be some sort of humor. Some super quick housekeeping. As I said, I have two amazing guests with me, Kim Quinlan and Shala Nicely. I'll introduce them in a moment. They'll go over some quick major talking points, get us started, and then we'll go right into questions. So if you have some questions, put them in the comment section. We'll try to get to as many as we can. We'll also give you a list of resources at the end that you can continue to have your questions answered. So with that in mind, I would first I'll go from left to right. I would like to introduce Shala Nicely. Shala, LPC, is the author of Fred in the Refrigerator, which is an awesome book. I highly recommend it. Taming OCD and Reclaiming My Life, and co-author with John Hirschfeld, MFT, of Everyday Mindfulness for OCD, Tips, Tricks, and Skills for Living Joyfully. She's a counselor and cognitive behavioral therapist in Metro Atlanta, Georgia, specializing in the treatment of OCD and related disorders and anxiety disorders. Shala produces The Shoulders Back, we can all practice that now, tips and resources for taming OCD newsletter and blogs for Psychology Today, offering an inside perspective on life with OCD. Thank you, Shala, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And last but certainly not least, we have Kimberley Quinlan. Kimberley is a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California and founder of cbtschool.com, an online psychoeducational platform that provides online courses for those with OCD and BFRBs who do not have access to mental health care. Kimberley also is the host of Your Anxiety Toolkit podcast, which is a podcast aimed at providing mindfulness-based tools for anxiety depression, and BFRBs. She is also the goddess of Instagram. We all love following her, and they're so grateful. So thank you, Kimberly, for being here. So at this point, I'm actually going to be quiet and turn it over to Shala and Kim to start us off with some important information. So whenever you guys are ready.
Great. Thanks, Ethan. And thanks everyone for joining us here today. We're here to talk about some tips to help you during this very uncertain time. And we're going to share some tips from a blog post that Kimberly and I wrote in concert with Dr. Reed Wilson, who couldn't be with us today. And so we're going to share those 5 tips with you to get us started. And then we're going to open it up for your questions. And Jeff is saying that he can't hear me. So I guess we should ask the audience, Ethan, can the audience hear me?
Yeah, can the audience hear, can everyone hear Shala talking on your far left screen? Just give us a yes, maybe, for those of you that can. So Shala, go ahead and say anything. Let's see if people can hear you. I can't hear her.
Anything? Anything?
I can hear Shala pretty good.
Here comes my cat.
Leslie says yes. Everybody's saying yes. So Jeff, I love you, but it's you.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody can hear you, Shala. So we're good to go.
Okay, so we're going to get started with these tips. And the first one is about news. And I think it's very tempting to check the news frequently to see what's going on. But I can tell you that my anxiety rolls with how often I'm checking the news. So if I'm checking the news a lot, my anxiety's up. If I'm watching the stock market, my anxiety is doing whatever the stock market's doing, up and down, up and down, up and down. So figure out a frequency that works for you. Maybe it's once a day, maybe it's every other day, maybe it's not at all, and you're going to get your news from your friends and family. I think figure out what works for you and recognize that we're probably going to be more susceptible as people with OCD to checking frequently, because that's what OCD would want us to do if OCD were involved. And so do your best to figure out what works for you and don't check more than that.
Right. So I'm going to discuss here about travel. And I know a lot of people have had travel plans for the future. I myself have a trip planned internationally in 3 weeks' time, so I very much know this topic. And what we're wanting to really talk about here is a lot of people are reporting that they're really struggling with the decision or not of whether to travel or not. So what we're really encouraging people to do is, let's say, like in my example, we are planning on traveling in 3 weeks. I'm not going to spend today trying to solve whether I'm going to go. I'm not going to spend today trying to solve what will be going on at that time when I plan to travel. So what we're really suggesting here is to set a deadline, a time of when you will make that decision. For us, it's a week before, and then we will consult with, really reliable sources such as the CDC and the World Health Organization to help us make that decision. But in the meantime, we're not going to be ruminating. We're not going to be asking for reassurance on, should I go? Should I not go? Will I get sick or will I not? We're really just going to stay very, very present until that deadline, until we get to that place where we have the information that we need to make that decision.
So let's talk about contamination concerns. This is a really tough time for people with contamination OCD and health anxiety, and I have both. So I know what it's like. If you've read my book, As Fred in the Refrigerator, you'll see a lot of examples in there where I did some things that probably weren't all that hygienic. And I did that as exposure to work on getting better because I had pretty severe contamination OCD. And there are a lot of us who have been working in our recoveries to do things in a way that other people might find like we're not being hygienic, but it's working for us because it's helping to keep our contamination OCD in check. But now what we're recommending is that you give yourself permission to follow guidelines, follow the CDC guidelines, follow World Health Organization guidelines, or file guidelines from your local public health agencies. It's really important that everybody do this. And so the exposure shifts. The exposure is now to follow the guidelines and try not to do more than the guidelines, because your OCD is going to tell you it's an authoritative body on this, that it knows what to do, and it does not. OCD is not the CDC. It can't tell you what to do. It doesn't know what to do. So follow actual authoritative guidelines and try not to do any more than that, and be compassionate with yourself if you mess up, which we're all going to. The way to think about this is that if you think about physicians who might have contamination OCD, even during their exposure practices, they are still going to need to follow the guidelines of their profession. So physicians going through contamination OCD, ERP, are going to have to try to do only what is recommended for prepping for whatever procedure they're doing, and no more than that. And what it's like now is that we're all joining them in trying to follow some standard procedures while this pandemic is going on. So that's a way to put it in perspective so we can normalize a little bit what we're all trying to do.
Right, right. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit here about self-compassion and mindfulness. So from my experience, everything is moving really fast at this point. Things that, schools are getting closed down. The news is just going, at a high speed. Everybody's rushing to the grocery store. And so what I'm really wanting to encourage, and what Shala and I have really worked on with the article, is this is a time for you to slow down, right? And to be very gentle with yourself, because this is really, really hard. This is a time where, I've said to all of my patients in session is the goal here isn't to make your anxiety to go away, because it won't. Things are happening around us. The goal here is to become very compassionate towards yourself and very gentle with this experience. So I want to run you through a very quick acronym that has been really helpful for a lot of my clients. And I have a link to a printout that you can use after you watch this video to sort of get that, and take it home and practice it. And it's called RAIN. The acronym starts with R, which is first to recognize. So when things are really moving very fast, we first want to slow down and just recognize what's going on for us, right? Recognize with non-judgment, right? It's not good or bad. It's just, oh, I'm noticing that I'm really anxious right now, right? The A is for allow or accept. Often when we feel anxious, we do a lot to push that anxiety away. And now's a time where, like I said, the likelihood of anxiety going to zero is very low right now. So we want to have a really inviting relationship with our anxiety, allow it and accept it. The third point is investigate. And what I'm encouraged with this is the investigation part of the acronym is really about being curious. Instead of being very fixed in your view, like this is bad things will happen, or, there's black and white thinking that we often do. Investigate is being curious and saying, well, maybe, I don't know, maybe I could really take a look at this and recognize that this could go, in ways that aren't so bad, or, we're really looking at being just simply curious. The last one is an N, and it's for nurture. This is where we meet our struggles with the most amount of self-compassion that you can muster up. First, what I really encourage you to do is really, again, slow down and get in touch with the fact that this is hard for you. And that's okay. It's totally okay that it's hard. And it's hard for everyone. You're not alone in this experience. I think people all over the world are coming together here and having this joint experience, which is so rare on the planet Earth. So there is the acronym of RAIN. Like I said, you can get the link afterwards if you're wanting to practice that.
And the final thing that we want to remind you of is that you can do this. People with OCD are some of the strongest and bravest people that I know. OCD is incredibly debilitating, the 10th most disabling condition in the world, in fact. And when you've gone through exposure therapy, when you've worked on reclaiming your life from OCD, you have given yourself an above average skill set for managing anxiety and uncertainty. And this COVID-19 situation is all about uncertainty. There are so many unknowns, and that's what makes it so scary for everybody. Remind yourself over and over again that you have better skills than the average person to manage this, because this is all about managing anxiety and uncertainty, and you've got this.
So are we ready to go into some questions?
We are.
Awesome. Okay, so for those of you that are leaving questions, I sincerely appreciate it. I'm going to try and pick out questions that relate specifically to the topic. I have a feeling for those of you that are asking more broad questions that they're going to be answered within the questions that we bring up. So please, I'm giving you a little reassurance. I'm not actively trying to skip questions. I also want to say thank you. We have some people from Turkey that are in and some people from Mexico. So hello to our international friends. Thank you so much for for joining us. It's pretty amazing. I actually want to dive right into this. You'll see the question appear on your screen. So this is from Lindsay Robin at 2:06 p.m. And this hit home very closely. She says, I'm being tested for the virus, waiting results. I'm immune deficient and have been ritualizing so much. How do I figure out how much is too much to be checking my oxygen and temperature, et cetera, required by doctors, but also have health anxiety? So it's very confusing. Let's start with Shala. I think you touched on this a bit in your initial words.
Sure. So, this is a scary situation to be tested, when you have immune issues. And I think that what we want to do here is use your doctors for guidance. So what your doctors are telling you to do is what we want to do. And it's hard for those of us with health anxiety to trust our doctors because OCD doesn't trust anybody, even if they have a medical degree. I always tell my clients that OCD thinks it has a medical degree, but it's a fake one. We want to trust the people with the real medical degrees and follow what they say. And OCD isn't going to like it. So following doctors' orders becomes the exposure.
Right. And I would agree with that. This is where the work of being uncertain, this is where we have, like Shala said, all of this training. So also just to recognize that uncertainty that's showing up and validate that. Ultimately, that's the work that we need to do, is just to recognize, like, yes, this is an uncertain time, and follow the instructions that Shala gave.
And I would also add one more thing is just be really nice to yourself right now. This is going to be hard, and just be kind. This would be hard for anybody. It's harder for us with OCD.
And cuddle with your dog, who's super cute, by the way.
Your dog is super cute.
Right. That's my professional opinion, because I'm not a professional, so I can have an opinion about your dog. I hope that gave you some insight, Lindsay. It's definitely not an easy fight coming from somebody who took his temperature 100 times a day for 15 years. I totally get that feeling to want to monitor and check. So finding that balance is really important. Jess, I'm going to back up just a little bit to grab Brian Kaminsky's question at 2:05 p.m. What are some things to say to my 17-year-old who is having a really hard time with uncertainty? Let's throw this out.
Sorry, was that me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, I think the first thing to remember here is you're there to be their support system, but we're not there to be a source of reassurance for them. And it's really important to be able to maneuver and know the difference between the two. So, of course, this is a really uncertain time for them. Ultimately, when things are uncertain, what is it that we usually need? We usually need, to know we're not alone. We usually need a sense of compassion and feeling heard and seen. And these are things that you can provide your child. The other thing to recognize here is if the uncertainty is to a degree that is debilitating for them, it's okay during this time to reach out and ask for a professional's help. It's okay to just for this time, if they're really struggling, to get additional resources that the IOCDF have provided. So I would also be a person that's providing resources for them without being a person who provides reassurance.
I think the other thing we can do here is help normalize uncertainty, because we all are really good at managing uncertainty on a day-to-day basis, and we just don't recognize it. For instance, we all leave our homes, go to school, go to work. I know that may be changing right now, but typically that's what we would be doing. And we leave and we assume when we get home, our loved ones are going to be there. But actually, that's a lot of uncertainty. They may not, for whatever reason. And we're managing that uncertainty every day. We're all getting in cars as passengers or drivers. It's one of the most dangerous things we can do. And we all just go do it anyway. And that's huge uncertainty. So I think pointing out where your 17-year-old might already be tolerating a great deal of uncertainty, just so they can recognize, gosh, they do have that uncertainty tolerance muscle they're already using. Now we're going to apply it to the current situation.
Great. Thank you so much. I keep seeing comments from all over the world, and I'm almost a little moved a little bit, because I love the fact that we're just all coming together, everyone from all over the world, to have this conversation. And we'll keep having the conversation as long as it's necessary and as long as it benefits the community. So I want you to know that. This is a question from Tara Lynn Page Jess at 2:09 p.m. How do I manage ERP without being negligent? My OCD is so in check, and I am living out OCD, interfering. But my question is, how do I know if I'm being too relaxed because I have a 3-month-old and elderly grandparents? So I think she's asking how much vigilance is too much vigilance, considering she also has to look out for other people, not just herself. Shala, let's start with you.
So I think what we want to do now is recognize that following the guidelines is the exposure. And so we actually do want to do what CDC, the World Health Organization, is saying. And so what your OCD might say about that is you didn't do it well enough, you didn't wash long enough, you're being too relaxed, you should do more. But if you're using the guidelines as your exposure, you can say, yes, but I'm following the guidelines. I may or may not be doing it absolutely correctly, but I'm doing my best.
All I would add to that as well is it's really helpful to recognize in your body when you are doing a compulsion, right? When you're doing things in this very urgent way. And so what I often will talk to patients about is recognizing that you can often tell whether you're going above and beyond regarding compulsive behavior when there's a sense of urgency. There's a sense of clinging to the answer. And if you're finding that you're doing your testing and what you may be checking in that fashion of, really clenching together and wanting to get the answer really fast, that may be a way for you to be able to differentiate in your body and recognize in your body whether you're following the instructions or maybe you've stepped into doing a compulsion.
That's great. And I think what you guys are outlining is it really is a 1-2 punch. Shala's talking a lot about the actions, the ERP that's involved, and really leaning in our skills and tools. But with that, in this situation comes the discomfort, the doing things that are quite out of our comfort zone that we're not doing. And that's where the self-compassion really comes in, and the mindfulness in trying to stay in the present moment, because as we know, anxiety only exists in the past or the future. And so we only know what we know here and now. So it really is combining all of the skills that Shala and Kim are talking about into sort of one useful practice. David, I don't want to mess up your last name, but 2:11 p.m. David McIlvenna all the way from Ireland. Hello to our friends in Ireland, in Dublin. Any advice on what to do when stuck indoors, not having the structure of work, gym, sport, etc.? What can we do? Kim, Shala, we both know that for those of us that struggle with OCD, routine is so, so important to keep our minds busy, keep us healthy. Obviously, our routines are being extremely disrupted at the moment. What are some suggestions? Let's start with Kim, and we'll have you both answer the question.
Right. Well, this was actually something we did at home just this morning because my children are going to be off school for 2 weeks minimum, but probably closer to a month. And what we did is we all gathered the things that were important to us and we put it into a schedule of our own. The schedule is not something we have to be, perfect at, but I think that a small degree of structure is really, really helpful to help manage mental health. Now, it's raining right here in Los Angeles. So in terms of getting exercise, it's making it very difficult. So we've had to come up with really creative ways to get the energy out. And that is, it's okay. I think the big part to remember here is it doesn't need to be perfect, and it's okay if you're, not performing at the same degree that you were, but some routine is really, really helpful. So I would sit down and just put together a small routine that is flexible, but that you can fulfill at home.
I think it's important to be creative here. And fortunately, those of us with OCD are super creative. And figure out how you can recreate some of the things that you might be doing out of your house in your home. For instance, I take Zumba several times a week. One of my instructors next week is offering 3 Zumba classes through Facebook Live instead of at the gym. So I will be doing Zumba by myself in my living room, but knowing that the other people that I typically do Zumba with are going to be doing it in their living room. So it's a shared experience. We're just all doing it on our own. I think finding ways to stay in touch with friends and family members, texting, FaceTime, Skype, make that a priority. Make sure that you're getting some social interaction with people each day so that you don't feel isolated and alone. You can use the IOCDF's My OCD community, the Health Unlocked community too, to connect with other people who have OCD so that you also don't feel isolated in terms of managing the disorder.
That's great advice. Absolutely. I was just thinking the other day, like, I'm going to leave this in 3 weeks when we can all kind of come out of our houses and wonder why I haven't learned 2 languages in the process. You know, it's like, learn a language. I think it's now a great time to sort of go back to all those things you've been wanting to do, but we've been so caught up in life, we haven't had a chance to do them yet. Is there a book that you've wanted to write? Is there a poetry that you've wanted to write? Is there a movie that you've wanted to see? Quality time with your family. I think those are all great points. I'm going to quickly address Paul Johnson's question at 2:14 p.m. We've been talking on it a bit, but I want to maybe dive in a little deeper. So Paul asks, it's tough because the exposures that I do are now not safe. So it seems though it feels like I can't stay ahead of the game or on the offensive. How do you stay in the game? Sorry, I lost my place. How do you stay in the game against OCD when the line of what's rational and irrational seems to be blurred to someone with OCD with the current state of things in this world? So I know we've definitely touched on, we need to follow the guidelines. I dealt with this the first time. I just like to do this above the sign, Kim. So you can, there you go. We got to see your smile. Yeah. We definitely know we need to follow the guidelines. We definitely need to know. But I think, you know, with OCD screaming in our faces, it's really hard to trust where that gray area is and you know, be fused with what's healthy and what isn't healthy, and really get stuck in our heads between what the CDC or the WHO organization is telling us to do, what our OCD is telling us to do. So maybe provide some additional of ways we can diffuse from those thoughts and really be able to see the OCD thoughts from what's practical and what we should be doing. Shala, why don't you start?
Sure. So I actually just posted a blog about this, which we will have a link to in the stream somewhere here. I think we're changing our expectations about what success is. Those of us with OCD can be pretty hard on ourselves if we're not continually improving or continually maintaining our recovery at the level that we would like. And we can feel shame if we don't do what we need to do, or we feel we need to do to keep things as we'd like them to be. And I think we need to change our expectations here. You know, there's an old equation, happiness equals reality minus expectations. I think we want to drop our expectations here. I'm not saying that we should all expect, gosh, we're going to all relapse, because that's the way with our OCD brain, sometimes we want to look at it. We're either doing awesome or we're relapsing. I think there's somewhere in between where sometimes we're going to win, sometimes OCD is going to win, because a lot of this is pretty fuzzy. Some guidelines are still fuzzy, still being debated right now in terms of types of activities that people are participating in. And so, for instance, for me, I'm just doing the best I can to make decisions for myself, and recognize that some of it may end up being compulsive for me. Some of it may put me back a little bit in my recovery. That's okay. I'm doing the best I can. So I think lower your expectations for a perfect recovery, for being able to really go out there and do lots of exposure right now. I think recognize that this is really challenging, and your OCD is probably going to do some up and down stuff, and that's okay.
So I'm going to take a different approach to this, because the words that really stood out for me is, I can't stay ahead of the game. And this is a really great, you know, little comment that you made, because when these things happen, it's similar to when OCD changes themes, which it does for a lot of people, is we have to sit back and look at what is the main goal of managing OCD. It's being uncertain and having a real degree of willingness to have that uncertainty about and bring it with you on your day. So when you're saying, I can't stay ahead of the game, I'm actually wanting to empower you and say, you really can, even though the guidelines are changing and they may continue to change, staying ahead of the game is really stepping back and looking at the real work here is being uncertain willingly. And as Shala said, you'll be good at that some days and not other days. But if you can keep your eye on that being the goal, you won't fall behind in the game, because it's that, you know, again, OCD always wants to make things certain. So if you can practice making it not certain, you're ahead of the game.
I love that, Kimberly, because I think that what you're saying is, let's take a view of uncertainty about our recoveries. It's uncertainty what our recoveries are going to be like during this. That's a meta exposure. I love it.
And I think that based on previous, I know, streams that Kim has done and Shala's done and I've done, as OCD sufferers, we want to get our ERP done perfectly. We want to do it so we don't. And I think the word perfectly in this situation might feel dangerous. If we don't get it perfectly, then, oh my gosh, what if we contract this virus or don't get sick? You know, there's even more pressure to do this all perfectly so we don't mess up, because messing up mean something worse before. But in reality, it is all about addressing on the uncertainty. And so, you know, it's be okay not being okay, and be okay not doing it all perfectly. As you say, Kim, you know, strive for a B-.
Yeah. And maybe not spend so much time trying to solve what's rational and irrational, because, you know, it's such a tough time. Sometimes we can get stuck on just that alone.
Yeah. And I also think it's okay to lean on, lean on your therapist, lean on people that support you, lean on people, you know, it's not about asking for reassurance. It's more about using people's healthier parts of the brains to help guide you. I always call it handing over the keys. So if you're really struggling with an issue, I know when I struggle with my issues with my own therapist, I always say, look, I'm having a really hard time identifying what's OCD and what's value-driven Ethan decisions. Can you help me clarify that for me so I can make the best decision that's best for me? So being able to lean on someone for that support, it's okay to do that. It's okay to reach out, and it's okay to try and determine what's the OCD. Maya Tadros at 2:16 p.m. Jess, what is the best way to limit exposure to the news, especially on social media where it can pop up at any time? I think we were probably getting triggered when we least expect it. We just wanted to see some kittens and babies. That's all we were looking for.
So
go ahead, Kim. Yeah, or Shala, go for it. Yeah.
I'm going to turn this one over to Kimberly, being the social media goddess that she is.
Well, actually, what's interesting, and I will give you a little bit of a fun fact, is only 2 days ago I posted on this specific subject, and it was probably the most shared post I've had in a very long time, which really proves to me that people need help in this department. My personal advice is to limit your exposure to one source per day. I think that when we're getting it from one channel to the other channel, things can get a little crazy for us. And so if you can limit it to one per day, and also limit the amount of time, everybody's different, right? I've had clients and patients yesterday who said, no, I think I really value the news. I want to listen to 20 minutes. And others who said, no, I think 5 minutes is fine. But in addition to that, my recommendation is to get your news from a paper form or a written form, because the news, while it's I love the work they're doing, they're covering it, they're giving us information, but it's very dramatic. They've got pictures of a hospital and they've got pictures of a sick person. And right now, we don't really need that. We just need the facts to know what we need to do so that we can be healthy. And so I really encourage people to find a reputable source that feels right to them, and get your news from a media that is written.
I think that's great. So Shala, let me pose a question for you. Is this a situation where we can't have our cake and eat it too? In other words, if we're extremely triggered by news and news from all different sources, and we are very much engaged in social media all the time, and want to see what our friends are doing, we want to see what our family's doing, we want to see what's up in other people's lives. So we're now engaging in a feed where at any moment we could be shown something that could be severely triggering, be information that we didn't necessarily want to know. Maybe we got in our 10 minutes of news. How should we curtail social media intake so as to not avoid, but at the same time respect our what we need for ourselves in this process to maintain?
So I think we might, if you find social media to be really triggering in an overwhelming way, you might want to change how you're interacting with people and move from social media to texting or the phone or FaceTime or Skype, so that you're still getting social interaction. You're still able to catch up with people, but you're doing so in a way that your mind isn't being bombarded with all sorts of things that's just going to make you anxious and feel panicky.
Right. I'll add, it's inevitable. We're going to be given very strong opinions by people. Even if you're not on social media, you may get it from your family members and friends. For me, what I do a lot is just to go, there's uncertainty, right? Or there's anxiety. And as they're telling you all of the scary things, or you're hearing or seeing the scary things, you can just recognize inside you what's showing up. And again, be an observer to that. Another
way to take that even further is to use social media time as an exposure. Like, open up Facebook or Instagram and go, okay, OCD, here we go. Boy, I hope I hear some scary stuff. I'm just going to sit with this uncertainty because I want to be on here and see what my friends are doing, and it's going to come at me. And that's great. That's an opportunity to practice. So I think there are different ways. There's like a continuum of how you can do this, and there's no right or wrong way. It's really just what works for you.
And that's a great transition, Shala, into the next question. It's just two down, Jess, at 217 from Melina Dell. I'll probably start with just a quick observation, but she says, I'm just starting ERP. I can ruminate my way into somatic symptoms. Is there a way to expose myself without giving myself an anxiety-induced sore throat? I think this is a great question based on what we said, because again, we're all talking about uncertainty. And this conversation is also about not sacrificing our goals to overcome OCD, and at the same time, stay vigilant and mindful of what we need to do for our health. And so I think this is a perfect example of maybe continuing to follow our values in terms of treating our OCD. And so I'll turn this over to Kim, because this is a great question.
Okay, so if I understand the question correctly, you're saying that you don't want to have this anxiety-induced sore throat. And I actually would encourage you to shift your perspective here in actually wanting to have an anxiety-induced sore throat. I'm not saying that's easy, and I'm not saying that's fun, but this is again where you can, like I was talking about, like, I'm noticing that my throat is sore right now. I'm noticing, that my chest is tight, and, this is a respiratory problem that we're having with COVID-19. So, my chest is tight. I'm noticing that. And also be an observer to your thoughts and what it's telling you about that. Oh, that's me, the first symptom of getting this. So I think in this case, it's like, okay, let's actually bring it.
And I think it's important to note, Melina, that you're just starting ERP. And so you're getting more and more insight. And right now that can feel dangerous, especially bringing on something that may be symptomatic to the thing we're talking about and afraid of. But in fact, with ERP, embrace the fears and embrace the discomfort and kind of get our hands dirty. In this case, it's just get our hands dirty in a safer way that we're following the guidelines and rules. So I think as you continue to do ERP, you'll gain further insight into the things that Kim is talking about. Shala, did you have anything to add on that?
Nope.
Okay. Can I just add one more thing?
No, be quiet.
Okay, so this is the way I look at this. We don't really need to seek exposure right now, because life is an exposure. Sometimes what can be really helpful is if we shift our attention just at this time, not always, but may be helpful, to really just work on the response prevention piece of ERP. So right now, like I said, we can look for exposures. And if you're doing that, cheers to you. But right now, life is the exposure. So our emphasis should be practicing not paying attention and not giving that your only part, your only concentration, maybe not asking for reassurance right now. And if you can even drop down and limit that a teeny bit, that's still winning in my mind. If you can practice not avoiding, but within the realms of what has been encouraged by the CDC, is if you can practice that and reducing avoidance, you're winning. That's amazing. If you can practice not ruminating or doing checking behaviors, you're going in a wonderful direction.
And I think too, look for where OCD is being sneaky. So I was noticing that my OCD desperately yesterday wanted me to go back to my house when I was walking my dog Bella to check to see if I'd locked the door. That's something that hasn't bothered me about in a long time and has nothing to do with the current situation. But it's on high alert. It's on the lookout. And so if you can do response prevention in those areas, which fortunately, I'm like, nope, sorry, OCD, not coming back. Be on the lookout for opportunities to say, no, OCD, I'm not doing that, when it's trying to get you to do things that aren't even related to the current crisis, just because it's scared, it's trying to get some control by getting you to do these rituals.
That's such a great point. OCD and stress are best. So when stress pops up, OCD loves to pop up. I've been noticing all kinds of thoughts that I haven't had in the longest time. So being able to challenge those thoughts, things that have nothing to do with OCD, with COVID, the thing that's going on around us. So it's a great point, you guys. I'm gonna stop talking. Denise has a good question. I'm actually curious because I might want more specific, but Denise Horton asks at 219, Jess, my husband gets upset with my Purell game and washing my hands all the time. I have 2 special needs children and my own severe autoimmune medical conditions. What should I say to help him understand? Kim, this is a great self-compassion question.
Yeah, I mean, this is the hard piece is, people who aren't fully educated in OCD and haven't had OCD often tend to sometimes have very strict or very rigid views of what's right or wrong. But in this case, I think, as Ethan was saying, is to meet yourself with a lot of compassion and communicate to him as best as you can what it feels like for you right now, what is going on for you right now. So it sounds like he said he gets upset. So I'm assuming that was happening before COVID-19. And so in this case, I think for you, even if someone is judging you or disagreeing with you, you can also be very compassionate for yourself in this moment.
Great, thank you. I'm going to try to keep an eye out for questions where we delve into a little bit more different subjects. So again, I'll give you some resources at the end. If we don't get to your question, feel free to email and we'll definitely give them an answer. Ashley Marie at 2:22 p.m. How do we deal with guilt? What a great question. I'm paranoid of giving it to my parents. Feel guilty for flying to Florida recently and visiting them, even though I was really careful. I'm more worried about getting someone else sick versus myself. This plays to a very common OCD subtype. What if I kill someone? What if I actually murder someone? Now, what if I'm a carrier? And what if I bring it to somebody that I know and love? How do we deal with this? Kim, let's start off and then we'll go over to Shala.
Okay, so I was hoping you'd give me this question. Okay, so I think it's really important first to understand what guilt is. The definition of guilt is an experience that you have if you've done something that didn't line up with your values or that was, quote unquote, wrong, right? That you've made a mistake or you've struggled in a way. And I think what's happening here is OCD is jumping on that and trying to talk you into sort of what's the word, like going ahead of the game and blaming you for something that hasn't happened right now. So what I often will encourage people to do is to recognize that guilt is showing up and to understand that just because we feel something to be true doesn't actually make it a fact. That this is what we call, it's a distortion called emotional reasoning. That just because we feel a feeling or a sensation doesn't mean it's actually true. And in this case, I think that there is a case of emotional reasoning happening for you. And so sometimes just being able to recognize, okay, guilt's showing up. We don't need to figure out whether you're guilty or not. We can just recognize that guilt's showing up. Again, we don't need to solve what happened and why I'm feeling this. Just recognize, okay, this is what's going on for me. This is what I'm feeling. I'm going to do nothing about it. Nothing about it. This is where we sort of insert the shrug emoji and recognize, oh, okay, guilt's here. Just because I feel it, doesn't make it a fact. And to move in that sort of a direction. I'm curious to hear what you say, Shala.
Yeah, so I completely agree with what you're saying. And I think what we want to recognize here is that if we lose insight into obsessions around this kind of thing, and then we accept the guilt as fact, and then we start acting based on the guilt. So we start, sort of walking around like this because we've hurt other people and really feeling bad and restricting our activities even more than other people are. And we start acting as if what OCD says is true, that you're out there hurting people. Now you're really giving power to the OCD. So I think it's really about, just being with the guilt and then acting as if the guilt weren't there. Because if we start acting on emotions that come from these kind of obsessions, that can further be compulsive activity that strengthens the OCD cycle. And I've actually written a blog about this particular topic for Psychology Today that I can see if we can add to the stream later that people can look at about this.
Awesome. Thank you, Shala. I was actually going to talk about social distancing because I had some questions for you guys, but Rachel asks the question. But Rachel, I'm going to get your question in 1 second. Aviva Khan at 2:24 p.m. Jess asks, as someone with OCD, I'm wondering how to support family members with other anxiety disorders without reassuring them. I know I can't force them and I have my own boundaries, but it's hard to see them struggling. And I'm wondering tips for how to support them. Shala.
Well, I think that one of the best ways to support other people is to ask them how you can support them. I think sometimes that we will think about how we would want to be supported and provide that to somebody else, but that may not actually be what they need. So being willing to sit down with family members who are struggling and being really compassionate. You know, this is hard for everybody. I know this is hard for you. I want to help you. What can I do? And then really honoring their request. And their request may be, you know what, I'm okay. I'm handling this best I can, and really honoring that if that's what they need.
Can I, so yesterday I saw back-to-back clients, and it was back-to-back COVID-19 discussions. And I left feeling really, really sad. The thing I want to encourage you here is you're having the same experience I was having, which is it's really hard to see people you love be in pain. That in and of itself is a form of suffering for you. And so the only work that I can do after a long day of watching the people I really admire and really respect go through such a difficult time is really to give myself self-compassion, right? To really give myself a moment to recognize this. Watching them go through a hard time is also hard for me, right? And I need to also meet that pain and suffering myself.
And Aviva, I also want to give you kind of a pat on the back, and you should too, because I think it's awesome that, you know, we said at the very beginning, a lot of the OCD community is probably more equipped to deal with the uncertainty than other people. And as you said, I am someone with OCD. How can I support other family members? I think that's really awesome that you're stepping up and advocating in this moment where perhaps your insight can help others. And so I just wanted to acknowledge you, acknowledging yourself in this moment, and just taking a step and giving yourself a pat on the back. I think that's awesome. I really wanted to get into social distancing because we got a lot of tons of information going on. What's helpful? I can use Rachel Johnson's question at 2:25 p.m. Jess. There are guidelines for social distancing, but it seems to vary from different communities how intense it is. Of course, OCD wants me to isolate as much as possible, but where's the gray area? So is it geographic specific? What is healthy social distancing, especially for those with anxiety and OCD? Is there a hard and fast rule we can follow? Do we need to stay fluid? Weigh in on social distancing. Let's start with Shala and we'll move to Kim.
So I'm glad you threw this question to me because I would love to answer it because I can tell you how my Zumba class was this morning. I decided to because I don't know how much longer they're going to be doing Zumba, at least live. And I figured I could keep my 6-foot social distancing while I was there. And what's hilarious is I was standing in the front row so I could see the mirror of the whole class. Everyone was perfectly spaced 6 feet apart. We were in the most perfect formation. My OCD could not have lined people up better than they were lined up. And so I think that, you know, everybody's trying. We have some routines in my Zumba class where we would like slap hands and stuff as part of our routine. My OCD is like, don't touch anybody. But I used sort of the fist bump, elbow bump sort of thing that some of my classmates were doing in those routines. I don't know whether that's right or not right now, honestly. That's one of those gray area things. And the decision I made today was I'm going to go ahead and do the fist and elbow bumps right now. And so I think we're all trying to figure out how this works, people with OCD and people without OCD. And it's very fluid. And I think don't beat yourself up. Like if I read tonight where they say fist bumping is definitely out, I'm not going to beat myself up that I fist bumped in Zumba today because I didn't know that. So I think we're all doing the best we can in some really murky and fuzzy areas right now.
Right. The only thing I would add here is that, excuse me, is just this word of as much as possible, right? Is if when you're saying that OCD wants you to isolate as much as possible, we're all going into some degree of isolation right now. And it may change to be more serious here in the future. I think the thing to recognize is if your isolation is starting to impact your relationships and your functioning, that's something just to keep an eye out. I know we're talking about distant, but really to be careful that your isolation isn't getting thicker and thicker to the degree where you're not communicating with the people you love. These would be guidelines that I would keep, on the other end of the spectrum, that you want to make sure you're still communicating, like Shala had mentioned before. It's just keeping an eye on making sure it's not taking you back, because we know that depression and shame can go along with isolation. So we want to make sure at this time, even though distancing is happening, we're not to fully isolate.
That's great. I was actually looking to see if there were any questions. There's some good questions here. They all relate more specifically to OCD in general, embracing uncertainty, how to deal with impulsions and intrusive thoughts around COVID-19 and getting sick. I was looking for, let's see, sorry for the pause, guys. I was trying to quickly scan. This will dive a little bit more into probably someone who has just come out of intensive treatment for OCD, and I think is trying to really determine what's OCD, what isn't. So Chloe Winston at 2:30 p.m., Jess, we'll all need to sit up a little straighter for this one. I saw the question. I was like, oh no, Chloe, don't worry. Feel very guilty about this. I know you already touched on this a little, but I'm having a hard time following the CDC guidelines. It says to wash for 20 seconds and wash after touching certain things. Just you guys can read, and then that touches something after. So she's talking a lot about cross-contamination. I just finished the OCDI summer, and I feel I've gained a lot of skills. But so what I'm hearing, you can probably take it down. Are you guys comfortable, Kim? And yeah, there you go. So what I'm gaining, did you need to see it again, Kim?
Yeah.
You did? Okay, bring it back up.
Ask Shala, and I'll just go from there.
No, but what I'm gaining is like, look, some of these people are in maintenance and management, and I think have with their OCD, and may have some really good insight into what cross-contamination is and what is their OCD versus what is reality. But if you've just gained all these useful skills and tools, if you've learned how to curtail whatever your compulsions are, and you've just now heard the difference between your voice and your values and your OCD, this stuff can get really blurred and really confusing. And Chloe definitely sounds like she's kind of falling into that tornado of like, well, if I touch this and I touch that and then that touch this, just getting wrapped up into the minutia. So what's some advice we can give Chloe, Shala?
So I'll tell her my.
You can take it down, Jess.
Yeah. Otherwise I'm gonna be way up here. I'll tell you my current experience. So I went to the grocery store a couple of days ago and I used a cart wipe. I never use cart wipes. In fact, in Everyday Mindfulness for OCD, John and I have a specific section for people with OCD saying don't use cart wipes. That's for other people. I'm now using cart wipes, which is a little bit surreal. But as I was walking around the grocery store, I recognized, I use this cart wipe, but then, I'm picking up this item and that item that other people have. I'm putting it down and I'm opening up the fridge and the freezer cases and I'm touching the pin pad. And of course, I notice all that because I have OCD. And what it was an opportunity to recognize, none of this is perfect. I cannot possibly wash my hands after touching every single thing in the store. I'd never make it through the store. And so I think you can use what you've learned in an intensive program to say, yeah, I recognize there's more uncertainty in this situation than probably anybody else is realizing. It's an opportunity to practice. I'm just going to do what I can reasonably do and live with the uncertainty that's coming with it. And that becomes the exposure practice. And I think being really kind to yourself that your brain is going to pick up on this stuff, other people's brains are not going to, because we notice these details. We notice these cross-contamination things that other people don't notice. So just be nice to yourself that this is going to be harder potentially for you because your brain is sharing all of this information with you as you go along through your day.
Ditto.
Ditto. I'll take credit for your answer, Shala. I don't have a problem with it. So at 2:35, we'll also have to lean up for this, but this is a great question from a parent. Pam Beckham Begg. Okay, Pam, I'll live with the uncertainty that I got it wrong. Oh, I feel terrible. My son's high school is closed. His sister's college is closed. And his school spring break trip has been canceled. He has done so well with his OCD, past hospitalization, several PHP with Rogers. I am so worried for him now. Notice him not really wanting to leave the house, etc., but he says he's fine. Yes, we do see a therapist regularly. Just as a parent, how to handle. I'm actually going to start this off while Shala and Kim catch up on the question, which is, I can tell you, first of all, is the one thing that you don't want to do is become the OCD police, because change your relationship to your son. It sounds like you've done job of really passing off the OCD therapy and the monitoring to his treatment team providers and things like that. And I think maintaining that type of relationship is really crucial even in these times. With that being said, there are definitely ways to communicate and approach your son on this stuff without him feeling attacked or feeling judged, and having open communication and dialogue in a compassionate way. And that's when I'm going to turn it over to Kim, because she knows all the cool ways to do that. So Kim.
Well, I think the thing to remember here is anytime we're watching a loved one, go through in some degree of recovery, we too have to practice the same tools that they practice, which is to be uncertain, to be compassionate, to communicate when you need support as well. So this actually may be a time where you need support as a parent, given what your family is amazingly done, and how you've obviously supported them. So I would actually encourage you to seek out your own support at this point, because absolutely, as a parent, it's like, as I said before, it's really hard to watch your child and be uncertain about what direction they're going regarding their recovery, as I said to Ethan. Now, I have actually seen this a lot this week, and the child is actually fine. They are doing okay. And the parent is thinking that their behaviors are compulsive, but they're actually just following the guidelines that were given to them by their teachers and so forth. So I think it's a matter of checking in with them, but also trusting them a little. If they're saying they're fine, you might find that they're actually doing better than you think.
You might also want to just have a family meeting about how this is all going to go. Everybody's going to be home. We're not used to that. Nobody's going to have their activities. Everybody's going to be on top of each other. What can we do as a family to maintain good family function in the face of all this? What activities can we do as a family? How can we give each other space? How can we be respectful of each other during this time? I think that's probably a good idea, even if you don't have OCD, but probably an even better idea if you do have somebody with OCD in the family.
Yeah. And all I would add here is, again, just to really reference what we talked about before, is let's say your son or someone we know has had contamination ERP treatment, and the emphasis has been on exposure, touching things, going around and touching all the things, and they're not doing that right now. Even though they're not getting that level of exposure, if they're doing the response prevention, they're doing a great job. Because this is a time where I wouldn't tell anybody to go and lick a doorknob right now. That wouldn't cross my mind as an exposure therapy. I'm going to put the heavy emphasis on, are you doing the response prevention? And if your child is doing response prevention, they're doing great.
Awesome. So unfortunately, we're closing in on the 3 o'clock hour, 12 o'clock Pacific time. So we may be able to get to one or two more questions, and then we'll wrap up. I want to respect everybody's time, including Kim and Shala's. I'm going to throw a question out there because I'm seeing a pattern in the questions. And so I would like to touch on this a little bit, even though it's not necessarily COVID-19 specific. And that is, what I'm seeing is a lot of these individuals that have OCD that are really struggling with determining what's OCD and what's me. What's my individual and what's the OCD voice, and because no matter what the circumstance is, I think there's a lot of difficulty to discern between the two. And I know, as somebody that's been in management and maintenance for 10 years, it's taken me a very long time to figure out what is my own voice and my values and what is OCD. And so I always turn to what's called Wise Mind to sort of determine what that is. But I would love for you guys to go into a little bit about maybe offering some tools, tips, and strategies on ways that we can kind of check in with ourselves and see if we can determine, our values and goals versus the OCD monster kind of yapping in our ear.
Right.
So Kim, why don't we start with you?
So what I think might be helpful, and this is maybe helpful, I'm not saying it's helpful for everyone, is it might be helpful for you to, as we've said multiple times during this video, is to consult with what is being suggested, but to actually have that written down somewhere so that these are the rules, but you're not to go beyond that. And I've had people write a line down the middle of a page, and they've given themselves, the few things that they need to follow. Interestingly, the CDC is really only recommending you wash your hands within the range that they've always told us to wash our hands: before eating, after going to the bathroom, after preparing, fresh and uncooked meats. Like a lot of these, the prep that they're giving us is stuff that we've been doing for a long time. So just on the left to have a list of what has been recommended, and on the right to write out the ways in which OCD is going to try to get you not to engage in those rules. And sometimes just writing it down and seeing the way that OCD can be tricky can help you throughout the day check in on what's going on, which voice is that. So that's a tip that might be helpful.
Shala.
I think here, this is another opportunity to have a meta exposure and embracing uncertainty, because I feel I'm pretty good at recognizing my OCD's voice. It's been hard over this past week. I think it's OCD, but then part of me is like, but is that me just trying to figure out what to do? And I'm not sure sometimes. And I'm doing the best I can with that. So I think also living with the uncertainty that this is a new normal that's fluctuating all over the place for all of us. And it's probably going to take a while for us to get our sea legs and figure out what is OCD and what's not OCD. And in that time, living with the uncertainty that I'm not quite sure, and that's okay.
That's great advice. I wasn't laughing at your answer. I was laughing at Chris Bear for saying I should have coughed in my sleeve when I coughed, which is hilarious, which, by the way, I'm just going to give a nod out to Unstuck, the OCD Kids movie, and Chris Bear on Instagram. He's an incredible advocate. He posts all the time. He has resources for kids and parents. So definitely check him out. I just looked and we pretty much covered all the questions, which I'm really, really excited about. I want to thank, actually, before we wrap this up, I would love to give you guys some final words and thoughts. So Shala, let's start with you.
I think my most important advice is be self-compassionate. This is hard. I think that it's hard for everybody. I think it can be harder for those of us with OCD because we're noticers. So we're going to pick up on things out when we're out and about in the news that can cause a lot of anxiety. And just treat yourself really well. Think about your best friend and then say, I'm going to treat myself like I would treat my best friend. I am going to take super, super, super good care of myself right now. That's so important.
Right. I mean, that's exactly what I would have said also. And what I will add to that is often what I have found is people with OCD do not believe that they deserve compassion. And if that is you, I want to, number one, let's correct that, because every human deserves compassion. Every human deserves this idea of being treated well. One of the things with self-compassion that is often misunderstood is self-compassion isn't supposed to take your discomfort away. It's there. It's a tool we use to meet our discomfort, but we're not doing it in effort to make anxiety go away or make your sadness go away. This is just, I always say, like, we've got to have a place. Can you see it here? Like, hold yourself like you would hold a baby chicken, right? And that gentle. You're not going to throw it around and be rough with it. And so you can't do that to yourself either. So they're the main pieces I would add. I think the other thing is reach out and get support right now. This is as much as it's a global issue, it's also a very lonely issue because in the moment you're having fear. I have noticed that a lot of people are very judgmental during this time on how you're dealing with it. So find people, like-minded people who, are struggling or not struggling, or however what is supportive to you. Reach out to them and stay very connected during this time, because again, it can be lonely in managing your anxiety during this time.
Well, I'm gonna take that opportunity to just thank everyone for coming out and spending this hour with us. I want to thank, obviously, Shala and Kimberley for joining us for some great Q&As and giving their incredible advice. Throughout the comment thread, there's been various links to all of their content. We have tons of resources for every one of you. The IOCDF has set up a support page. They'll put it at the bottom. It is iocdf.org/COVID-19. It's got all types of really important information ranging on all the topics that we've discussed. Kimberley Quinlan, the queen of content. Kimberley Quinlan has created a downloadable PDF to manage COVID-19 anxiety and stress using mindfulness and self-compassion tools. I'll say it quickly. It's at cbtschool.com/Rain. We will also put that in the comment thread. You can also follow her on Instagram at Kimberley Quinlan. She's got a bazillion followers and she's posting phenomenal content all the time. And then Shala is constantly writing blog articles on her website. She's the queen of blogs, so to speak. So her website is shalanicely.com. We'll also put links. The extensions are a little long with the blog name, so we'll also put links to all the blogs in the resource in the comment thread as well. So again, Shala and Kim, thank you so much for joining. As always, please never hesitate to reach out to the foundation. If you have questions, if you have comments, if you have concerns, if you need support, reach out. They have a dedicated staff member that's specifically there to answer your questions. You can always also email me at justethan@iocdf.org. I will always get back to your questions as quickly as I can. And since I'm home, I can probably a little bit quicker. We're discussing doing these town halls more frequently during this time, so keep an eye out on all the IOCDF social media platforms. If we can bring this to you even, every week for a month until this dies down a little bit, we'd to support you and ourselves in that way. And as always, thank you for asking very personal questions, because you yourself are advocating in this moment. And just as much as we want to help you, you're supporting and helping us. So I actually feel probably more comfortable and I have more peace of mind right now in this moment than I have in the last few days, just being able to get my mind off things and engaging with all of you. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for that. Again, special thanks to Shala and Kim. Take care of yourself, stay vigilant, stay safe, but most importantly, continue to take care of your mind and body. Practice self-compassion. And until next time, thank you. Have a great afternoon.